to the Ace Philosophy YouTube channel. I want to, in this video, expose a willful, knowing lie and deception that is being perpetrated by the global scientific community. And I'm going to explain what the lie is and how we know that the scientists are just, according to my analysis, just basically lying to their teeth to the public to promote false information. So, what is the background of this? About a week ago, from when I'm recording this video, there were a major announcement, and there was a flurry of articles being written in all kinds of scientific journals, magazines, and online publications about how they had supposedly found all of the nucleobases that are used in life on Earth on an asteroid. And we see now there were many online websites and probably paper publications that wrote about this. And I'm just providing you one typical one right here from Live Science. And this is what they pretty much all said. All five letters of DNA found on an asteroid speeding through our solar system. What do they tell us about the origins of life? And we see the sub description. JAXA samples reveal that asteroid Ryugu has a complete set of nucleobases, the building blocks of DNA, suggesting these ingredients of life may be common in the solar system. So, a little bit of background science for those of you who have taken biology. What are nucleobases? Nucleobases are basically necessary chemical molecules that are macromolecules used in DNA. If you remember the four of them, A, C, G, and T, and there's actually a fifth one using RNA, that's U. Yes, so those are the nucleobases, and they are obviously essential for life because without them, DNA couldn't exist. And without DNA, every single organism that we've ever observed needs DNA. So without them, without the nucleobases, life couldn't exist. So they're extremely essential to life. And there is a team of scientists, a number of scientists have claimed that they are finding these nucleobases just floating around in the solar system on asteroids. And I'm going to show you why this is such an absurd and problematic claim, and why I think it's so absurd, so nonsensical, so ridiculous that the only possible explanation is these scientists are just straight up lying through their teeth about this, that none of this is true and they know it. And they're trying to do this because they want to, convince the public that all these necessary ingredients for life are so abundant that life is just basically a necessity because there's all the necessary ingredients are just floating around all over the solar system. And it was just bound to happen eventually. First of all, you have to ask this: why are they even claiming that they're finding these? Why are they so excited about this? Well, here's the thing, folks. The reason that they're excited about finding them on asteroid is, guess what? They can't find them on Earth. Isn't that amazing? How these really necessary ingredients, they can't find them on Earth, being formed outside of living. Now, obviously, they're being formed within uh, living organisms by cellular processes, but they aren't found in nature. They can't be produced in nature. I'm going to show you all that that's the case, and that's exactly why they're trying to promote this lie, this deception, that these necessary ingredients are being found on asteroids. It's because they can't find them on Earth. So they're trying to outsource the problem to these rocks floating around in outer space, which makes no sense whatsoever. But they're trying to do it, and we're going to look at all the problems with these claims. First of all, let's look at a little bit of the background. Let's see. So here's the paper, the actual paper, not the articles that are written about it. A complete set of canonical nucleobases in the carbonaceous asteroid Ryugu. And it seems like this most recent one is these are a Japanese team, it seems, published online on March 16, 2026, which is about a week before the recording of this video. So here, this is the title of the page of the paper itself, and here's an excerpt from the abstract. Organic molecules delivered from extraterrestrial materials may have played a key role in supplying building blocks for life on Earth. Here we report all 5 canonical nucleobases, adenine and guanine, cytosine, thymine, and uracil, and samples returned from the C-type asteroid Ryugu by JAXA's Hayabusa 2 mission, and compare the results with data from similar extraterrestrial material. The detection of diverse nucleobases in asteroid and meteorite materials demonstrates their widespread presence throughout the solar system and reinforces the hypothesis that carbonaceous asteroids contributed to the prebiotic chemical inventory of early Earth. So we note that it's a hypothesis, it's not something that's been proven. And when look at how they say the widespread presence, note what they don't want to admit here is that it's not on Earth. They aren't finding these things on Earth. Apparently, they're just finding them in outer space, floating around on asteroids, which is pretty silly. That we're not finding them where we actually need them, but they're being found on asteroids, and they're apparently being delivered to Earth by the asteroids. Why can they form on asteroids but not on Earth? Why you would think an asteroid would be a far worse place for a complex molecule used in life like that to form. And then it has to fly through Earth's atmosphere and burn up and it explodes when it hits the ground, and these fragile little molecules are just being dispersed on the Earth this way and being used in we can't even get them to like form in like closely monitored laboratory conditions. This is also stupid. But the scientists are trying to promote this like it all makes sense. But we're gonna see why this is such a huge problem, and I'm gonna show you that they really are not finding these things on Earth. That fact has to be established. So I'm gonna do that right now before we go into why we know that none of this is makes any sense whatsoever. So just to review a couple of papers, just showing that what they're trying to accomplish with this deception. Here's a paper called The Chemistry of Abiotic Nucleotide Synthesis. So abiotic means without life. So these nucleotides are being synthesized today in living organisms, in biological organisms. Abiotic means without life. So how can this happen without living organisms already being present? The chemistry of abiotic nucleotide synthesis of RNA and DNA in the context of their prebiotic origins on earlier is a continuing challenge. Oh, look at that. The nucleotides necessary for life. Oh, they don't even know how this stuff formed on the early Earth yet. And they want to make it look like they just know how life began. They don't even have the basic building blocks yet. How did or how can the nucleotides form and assemble from the small molecule inventories and under conditions that prevailed on early Earth 3.5 to 4 billion years ago? Yeah, they don't know. They're asking the question even as recently as 2020 in this scientific paper. Another one. Nucleobase and amino acid formation through impacts of meteorites on the early ocean. Here they are again, talking about meteorites exploding into the Earth and spreading these, complex molecules all over the place. The emergence of life's building blocks on the prebiotic Earth was the first crucial step for the origins of life. Extraterrestrial delivery of intact amino acids and nucleobases is the prevailing hypothesis for their availability on prebiotic Earth because of the difficulties associated with the production of these organics from terrestrial carbon and nitrogen sources under plausible prebiotic conditions. Oh, what's that? Let's read that again. Because of the difficulties associated with the production of these organics from terrestrial sources. So basically, the reason they have to look in outer space is because the idea that they form on Earth is very difficult. It can't happen. They don't observe it happening, and they're not observing it happening. Uh, and there are a number of reasons for this that are, basically more complex than the average person can probably understand without knowing the details. But yeah, these things can't form on Earth. So they have to go and look on asteroids to find them. But they're necessary for life. So if the asteroids can't provide the problem and it didn't arise on early Earth, well, how did it happen? It's a big mystery. And they don't want people to think there's a mystery. They want to think that the origin of life is just a simple thing. It's so simple that everything's just being found everywhere, even on asteroids. But that's not what's happening. I'm going to show why. Couple more. Searching for lost nucleotides of the pre-RNA world was self-refining model of early Earth. The origin of the first nucleotides and the origin of RNA are related open questions, but they are not the same. Oh, so in 2018, as recently as 2018, and nothing's changed since then, by the way. These are open questions. The first nucleotides, life cannot exist, cannot even come close to existing without them. Same thing with RNA. And the nucleotides for RNA, the nucleobases of RNA are basically the same, except I believe the T is substituted with the U. So that's why there are five of them. There are four in DNA, and three of them are also using RNA with one substitution. That is, there may have been different nucleotides and many more of them on the prebiotic than there are found in X and RNA. The prebiotic synthesis of the RNA nucleotides is a tall order, and so is the prebiotic formation of RNA polymers, even with even with preformed nucleotides. So think about that. Even if they do have the nucleotides, the formation of RNA polymers is difficult. But they don't even have the RNA nucleotides, and that's a tall order in itself. So they don't have the RNA nucleotides, and even if they did, they couldn't figure out how to get the RNA polymers, which are RNA is an essential ingredient to life as well. And the RNA nucleotides are pretty much the same as the DNA nucleotides. So this is all a really huge problem for them that they're not explaining to the public. Let's keep going. I think this is probably maybe last one we'll look at to prove this point. Spontaneous formation and base pairing of plausible prebiotic nucleotides in water from 2016. The RNA world hypothesis presupposes that abiotic reactions originally produced nucleotides, the monomers of RNA and universal constituents of metabolism. However, compatible prebiotic reactions for the synthesis of complementary, that is, base pairing nucleotides and mechanisms for their mutual selection within a complex chemical environment have not been reported. Uh-oh. They haven't been reported. That means they're not seeing it. I just want to highlight they're not seeing the natural formation of these essential molecules for life in nature on Earth outside of living organisms. Remember, the organisms that already exist, they didn't exist when these molecules were first supposedly arising. So the fact that they're only producing living organisms is a problem. They have to figure out how they could have originally formed outside of life before life existed to basically synthesize them with cellular machinery. But they're not seeing it. They don't. When you go out in nature, you don't see these things being reported. Remember, we're here. That's a tall order. There are many difficulties associated with this. So this is why scientists are trying to pull the wool over this public's eyes and make it seem like, oh well, we found the solution. We flew up to an asteroid and we sent a satellite or a probe up there, and we found all the nucleobases just like what we needed on the asteroid. So it must have been that. And this is where you get these headlines, these excited, this flurry of headlines, and all these scientific public, heaving and panting about how they found all the nucleobases on asteroids. Which is, again, when you just think about it on a common sense level, why would there be nucleobases on an asteroid? If they can't form on Earth with all the chemical ingredients and the environment and the water, how are they going to form on an asteroid? They don't want you to ask that question. They just want you to say. They just want you to just accept this. We flew up to the asteroid and we found it. Don't ask any more questions than that. But they're not really doing that. So let's look at this. If you go into that same Live Science article, buried at the bottom of the article, they don't even want to mention this. You know what? They did a study on these samples. You know what they found? Let's read this. One study also revealed microorganisms crawling all over one asteroid Ryugu symbol. Wait, what? One study also revealed microorganisms crawling all over one asteroid Ryugu sample. Remember, Ryugu is the asteroid we're talking about. And they're finding microorganisms. What? They found bacteria on the asteroid? What's going on here? Why are they even talking about nucleobases when they have bacteria? Well, they admit what's going on here. But these microorganisms closely matched Earth's bacteria, and their presence was almost certainly the result of contamination after a sample returned to Earth. Well, almost certainly. It could be that there are just bacteria crawling around an asteroid, but because the bacteria resembled Earth bacteria, it was probably just contamination. Even NASA has had trouble keeping Earth bacteria off its interplanetary spacecraft in ostensibly sterile rooms. So, what they did, folks, They went up to the asteroid, they took samples, they brought them back, they studied them, and sure enough, and lo and behold, they found bacteria in one of the samples, and they're like, "What? Oh, these are Earth bacteria." So, this is clearly contamination. But the DNA, the nucleobases, and all those molecules we can't. That's all legit. Don't that's was actually on the asteroid. All right, so the program I'm using clipped the original ending of my video, so I'm actually redoing this. But bottom line is, folks, this is what's going on. It seems to me pretty clearly that what's going on here is that they're taking these samples, and I believe that they've been contaminated is the best explanation, and that's why they're finding all these really complex biological macromolecules on asteroids. It's not because the molecules were actually forming on these asteroids. And the reason that makes way more sense is because just use some common sense. We cannot get these molecules to form in laboratories on Earth just by mixing chemicals together. And they want us to think that they're forming on asteroids in outer space, which is a far more hostile environment for these fragile chemicals and things like that. So while in the original video I had a lot of other things I wanted to say, I just think I'll end it there because I think enough was preserved that it all should the picture should be clear now. Bottom line is this: the scientific community knows that none of this makes sense, but they're promoting this idea because they have an agenda. They want people to think that they have all the answers to how life could have started naturalistically, and that's just not true. That's what the lie is, and that's the agenda, the motivation behind all of this, and it's why we have to question them when they say things that don't make sense at a fundamental level. And there are a lot of reasons to doubt what they're saying. You have to ask, well, maybe they're being motivated by something else, and I believe that's what's going on. So I'm going to continue to push this. This may not be the only video I do on this. I will probably write a Substack on this as well. So go to my Substack. But just be aware of what's going on, um, and just learn to question and critically analyze these things. And just don't believe this. Don't believe they're. You can believe it if you want, but it's ridiculous. It's absurd. It really is. And I'm going to try and continue to expose these people, these frauds, and what's going on. And we'll see how much success I have. So thank you. This is Ace Philosophy out.